end by saying, the time has expired. The Honourable Member for Salaberry-sur-Loire will have 5 minutes for questions and comments when the House comes back to the debate on this motion. Statements by members.
Statements by members.
The Honourable Member for Shefford. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Valcourt Skidoo Grand Prix is being held in my riding. This is the biggest Skidoo event in the world. It began in 1983 in this municipality, which is the cradle of Skidoo as a sport, with 1,000 athletes from around the world, 250 volunteers, and family activities. This is one of the most spectacular events, and it will occur from February 12th to 14th. During this winter, Shefford County will also host 2 major hockey tournaments, the Waterloo National Pee Wee Tournament and the 45th Granby International Bantam Tournament. These tournaments attract teams from various provinces in Canada, the United States, and even Europe. Having myself participated in my youth, I can say that these tournaments teach young people discipline and healthy competition. But I want to also really thank the generous volunteers, and this also generates economic spin-off for our region. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, this week the City of Kamloops, British Columbia is proud to host Hockey Day in Canada. Hockey is a key part of Canada's identity and the identity of Kamloops, with over 86 teams in our city. Rogers Media said that we were the perfect setting for the 16th annual nationwide hockey celebration, and I couldn't agree more. Many residents have been working hard to bring this incredible event to life. We will be joined by Don Cherry, Ron McLean, former Canucks captain Trevor Linden, and my favorite visitor, Lord Stanley's Cup itself.
Here, here.
We have world-class facilities and athletes and a beautifully rich sports history. Later this year in April, we will also be welcoming hockey fans for the Women's World Championship. This is our favorite game. Come celebrate Hockey Day in Canada, Hockey Day in Kamloops.
Here, here.
The Honourable Member for St. John's East.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to commemorate the life of the Honourable T. Alex Hickman, who died last month at the age of 90. A proud native of Grand Bank, he served his province and his country with great distinction. First elected to the Newfoundland House of Assembly in 1966, he served as minister in both the Smallwood and Morris cabinets. In 1979, he was appointed Chief Justice of the Newfoundland Trial Division, where he professionalized the system by which magistrates were selected and trained. He chaired 2 royal commissions. The Ocean Ranger Commission uncovered and changed forever a culture of lax safety procedures aboard Canada's oil rigs, and the Marshall Commission recommended ways to ensure more equitable treatment of Black and Indigenous Canadians in the criminal justice system. Mr. Hickman was named an Officer of the Order of Canada in 2003. Canada is stronger because of his contributions. He was exceptional and will be greatly missed.
The Honourable Member for Timmins, James Bay.
Mr. Speaker, here's a lesson in classic Canadian economics. Ever notice that when the price of a barrel of crude jumps on the international market, the price at the pump goes up within seconds? Now, why is that? Well, they say it's the input price of the commodity being reflected to the consumer. So when the price of a barrel drops, say, 70%, what happens at the pumps? Well, if you live in Northern Ontario, it remains high. Well, why is that? Well, the answers get a little more vague. It's a lack of refining, it's a low value of the loonie, it's yada, yada, yada. Meanwhile, people in Timmins are paying about 20% more than Toronto and about 35% more than Regina. So it's hard-working families in the north who are subsidizing the refineries every time they have to go to work. And it's Northern Ontario businesses that are taking the hit. So I'm pleased that the City of Timmins has stood up on this issue of gas fairness. I'm inviting all northern municipalities to do the same, because we need to stand up for our residents who are being hosed at the pumps by big oil, gouged in their pocketbooks. In this time of economic downturn, how about a little bit of fairness to hard-working Canadians?
Here, here.
The Honourable Member de Thérèse de Blainville. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is with great sadness that I say that the community of Thérèse de Blainville has been in mourning for several weeks. We lost a much-loved person, Xavier Tristan Péloquin, 8 years old, whom we had affectionately nicknamed the Captain, died January 6th after a courageous battle that lasted almost 3 years. He was suffering from neuroblastoma. This is a cancer that particularly hits babies and young children. Over the last few years, our community has mobilized to organize record-breaking blood drives, and also made significant fundraising on behalf of the Canadian Cancer Society. Today, I want to emphasize today, particularly as we are highlighting World Cancer Day this week, in memory of the Captain, who's now navigating calmer waters. I offer my condolences to his mother, Annick Delanchon, and his father, Robert Poliquin, as well as his brothers, his family, and the community. Thank you.
The honourable member for Sarnia-Lambton.
Mr. Speaker, it's with great sadness that I pay respect today to the passing of former Point Edward Mayor Dick Kirkland from my riding of Sarnia-Lambton. Dick was born 83 years ago, one of the very few citizens to actually possess a Point Edward Village birth certificate. His community service spanned over 60 years in office. In addition to bringing the Point Edward Casino to his community, he was an avid sportsman who was inducted into the Sarnia Sports Hall of Fame for hockey and baseball. His support of the volunteer fire department, the fish hatchery, and the Tuscan Lodge is still celebrated today. The positive impact brought to Point Edward and surrounding area by his lifelong service is truly a legacy that will live on. Rest in peace, Dick.
The honourable member for Sault Ste. Marie.
Mr. Speaker, today I'm honored to stand in the House of Commons to wish the organizers, volunteers, and participants in this year's Bonsu Winter Carnival the best of luck. The first Bonsu was held in 1964 as a way to celebrate and make the best of Northern Ontario's cold winters. It was the brainchild of Sault Ste. Marie businessman Henry Bullock and was named by then 10-year-old Donald Norman. Over the years, Bonsu has become a winter staple in Sault Ste. Marie. It is an opportunity for residents of our community to get together with their friends and family and enjoy winter activities, including ice slides, a winter playground, and as reported in this weekend's National Post, a polar bear swim. As a member of Sault Ste. Marie, I'm delighted to have this opportunity to congratulate my community on the opening of the Bonsu Winter Carnival, which will begin on February 4th and last 10 days. I invite all members of the House to visit my riding and enjoy Bonsu.
The honourable member for Guelph.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to acknowledge the Rotary Club of Guelph's dedication to improving the lives of our northern neighbours through their project, Better Hearing and Education for Northern Youth. Hearing is such an important sense. It allows us to be able to live, to hear. It may often lead to participate in life more fully without limitations. Without the ability to hear, it may often lead to feelings of isolation. Children in the Arctic region are 40% more likely to suffer hearing loss, a contributing factor to poor attendance at school, the ability to read, and interacting with other children. Guelph audiologist Lynn McCurdy and the Rotary Club of Guelph were honored with the Arctic Inspiration Prize, a contest for ideas that provide concrete action plans focusing on issues of critical importance in Canada's north. On behalf of the people of Guelph, I'd like to thank everyone involved for their hard work, generosity, and dedication in addressing this matter.
The honourable member for Portneuf, Jacques Cartier. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to inform my colleagues that in the beautiful riding of there is a village that you would be really pleased to discover. It is the owner of Mr. Guy Drouin. This businessman is innovating once again, and he's investing $65 million for a new tourist attraction in order to offer summer 12 months a year. There's an interior aquatic park, and people vacationing there will have an unparalleled experience. And I think it's important also to mention that this Mr. Drouin's project is 100% privately financed. He's proving to us that with originality, creativity, and a solid entrepreneurial spirit, it is possible to do things without the aid of the state. So I laud him for his project in Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. He's developed a unique concept, unique in the world, and it's going to happen in my riding. Mr. Drouin, you're a visionary.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to commend the approximately 25 firefighters who responded Sunday to an intense fire at the Bedford Institute of Oceanography in Dartmouth. The fire started in the late afternoon and 6 crews of firefighters arrived quickly to face and extinguish the 20-foot flames. The damage to BIO is extensive, but would have been far worse if it weren't for the prompt service of our firefighters. I recently toured BIO, Mr. Speaker, with Fisheries Minister Hunter Tutu. We are lucky to have a modern oceanographic research.
Order. I remind the honourable member, first of all, I'm going to ask him to sit down. Okay. I remind the member not to use, and I've already reminded members and also tried to remind staff members of Parliament, when they assist members in advising them on these statements, not to use proper names, but to refer to the ministers by their departments. Now, the member has a few more seconds to finish his statement.
My apologies, Mr. Speaker. I think I can speak for all Canadians when I say thank you to the firefighters who put their lives on the line to protect us every day. If it wasn't for them, we would have lost a very important research facility in Dartmouth. Thank you.
The honourable member for York South Weston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Every February, Canadians mark Black History Month, an important annual celebration of the accomplishments of Canadians who trace their family heritage to Africa and the Caribbean. The great sacrifices and tremendous contributions of Black Canadians goes back to the early beginnings of Canadian history and have helped to create the Canada of today. We Canadians are bound together as a people by our shared belief in the principles of equality and fairness, and remain committed to working together to end discrimination and inequality. This month, I encourage all Canadians within our 3 beautiful coasts to learn more about the important role that Black Canadians have played and will continue to play in shaping the strong and prosperous Canada that we know and love. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The member for Calgary Rocky Ridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, today is Groundhog Day, and while some Canadians look for shadows, many others feel like Bill Murray in the movie of the same name. Last night, the Liberals voted against Energy East, an infrastructure project which would grow our energy sector and create jobs across Canada. Canadians, especially Calgarians, can be excused for having déjà vu. They remember the Prime Minister's father, whose disastrous energy policies led to massive job losses and alienated Western Canada for a generation. The economic downturn in the oil industry hurts all Canadians. Energy East is a shovel-ready project which would ease this hardship. It deserves the government's support. The Prime Minister had an opportunity to show leadership. Instead, we have years of Liberal-led economic uncertainty ahead of us.
Good.
The honourable member for Sackville, Preston, Chesapeake.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today. It gives me great pleasure to recognize the importance of Black History Month in Canada, as well as in my riding of Sackville, Preston, Chesapeake. Mr. Speaker, African Nova Scotians are one of the founding populations of our province as well as our country. Black loyalists fled the American Revolution to settle in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick between 1782 and 1785.
Canadians celebrate, and have done so for a long time, the contributions, if you will, of the blacks in Canada. And
Speaker, the community of North Preston is the largest Indigenous Black community in Canada, and also houses the largest Black community centre. So I ask all members to reflect on their contribution. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Trois-Rivières. Mr. Speaker, during the last election campaign, I often had the opportunity to mention that I faced many adversaries, but that I had no enemies. In this way, I wish to join my voice to those of all of the members of the board of Coalition Aide Victimes à la Période who wanted to recognize the 6 years of exceptional devotion of Mr. Yvon Boivin and advocate for the victims of Pyrrhotite. At the same time, I would like to reiterate to Mr. Gélinas, who is the new president of the coalition, and to all of his team that I will fully cooperate with them. I salute the approach through which they hope to gather all elected officials around the same table so that we be able to work together and find solutions to the problems. While I'm still convinced that the NDP's proposal is the most significant, I remain open to all forms of proposals for action that will result in the relief sought by the victims. It's not important to know who thought up the best idea, but what's important is that it happened quickly. And to this end, the budget, which will be before us soon, is an unmissable event, given the commitments made by the Prime Minister.
The Honourable Member for Lakeland.
Mr. Speaker, it is with a heavy heart that I rise today to pay tribute to the 5 Alberta men whose lives were tragically cut short while on a snowmobile trip last week. Vince Lowen of Vegreville and Lakeland, Tony Greenwood of Grand Prairie County, Ricky Robinson of Spruce Grove, Todd Chisholm of St. Albert, and John Garley of Stony Plain were killed last Friday in an avalanche on Mount Renshaw in BC. These men died while doing what they and so many Canadians love, sledding with friends in the great Canadian outdoors. Mr. Speaker, I would like to acknowledge the efforts of their fellow snowmobilers who attempted to rescue their friends against impossible odds. On behalf of this House, I wish to convey our deepest condolences to the families and the friends of these 5 men, and they have many friends. May their loved ones find peace and comfort in their cherished memories of Vince, Tony, Ricky, Todd, and John.
The Honourable Member for Ottawa West Nepean.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to congratulate 3 of my constituents who were honoured for promoting equality and diversity in my riding of Ottawa West Nepean. I would like to congratulate Shamarki Abdullahi, who received the Black History Month Community Builder Award for his work in creating opportunities for young people from diverse backgrounds. I would also like to congratulate Larry Hill and Desiree Kilolwa, who received the Dreamkeepers Martin Luther King Award. Larry Hill, a former Ottawa Deputy Chief of Police, was recognized for his work with immigrant and vulnerable youth. Desiree Kilolwa
was honored for his work on the elimination of sexual violence in the Congo and here in Canada.
Proud of these extraordinary individuals whose community leadership helps to make our society one where all are treated with respect and given the same opportunities to succeed.
Questions orales, oral questions. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's advice for hard-hit resource workers and their families is to wait it out. But what workers and their families really need, Mr. Speaker, is for the government to not make things worse. Unfortunately, making things worse is exactly what the Prime Minister is doing. His plan for a national carbon tax will mean more costs piled onto Alberta families on top of the carbon taxes they're already paying. Will the Prime Minister commit today to do no further harm to Alberta workers and abandon his national carbon tax plan?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For 10 years, the members opposite tried to do everything they could for Alberta, and they ended up making it worse. They were unable to get their resources to market. They were unable to diversify the economy. They were unable to recognize that combining environment and economy is the only way to build strong, resilient economy in the 21st century. Their lack of understanding of what nature of the new economy is was what led in part to the challenges that are facing now.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, it is not up to workers and their families to wait until things get better. The Prime Minister must not do more harm to the industry. His national carbon tax is going to harm the families of Alberta at a time when they don't need to be taxed even more. Will the Prime Minister do the right thing and put his national carbon tax on ice? Right Honourable Prime Minister. Once again, Mr. Speaker, the colleagues on the other side of the House do not understand how important it is to show that a responsible economy is achieved by protecting the environment at the same time. And their lack of foresight has put us in a very vulnerable situation that Albertans are suffering from today. We are going to work with the Alberta government and with all Albertans to ensure a more prosperous future for all. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, let's compare. The Conservative Party's first bill was the Federal Accountability Act to get big union money out of politics. But the Liberal Party's first bill is to reward big union bosses by getting rid of transparency and accountability for their expenses. Now, we know that the union spent a lot of money to help the Liberals get elected. In fact, at least one illegal union donation. So why is political payback to big union bosses priority number one for this Prime Minister?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I know the members opposite seem to look at this fall as some sort of dress rehearsal, but we actually got immediately to work and lowered taxes for the middle class while raising them for the wealthiest 1% with our very first piece of legislation. That was a commitment we made to Canadians. It's a commitment we've kept, along with many other commitments that Canadians expect us to keep. Thank you very much for noticing.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, the least we can say is that the government is lacking transparency in this story. Last week, the government leader said, we're not aware of anything. And yet yesterday, we showed that the government refused to table a document that showed that it is the Liberal Party that was teaming up with union bosses to fill the room. So can the Prime Minister tell us when he knew that the union was paying $100 to unionize workers to pretend to be Liberal fans? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, as I said, as soon as we learned that there were problems with regard to that event, we acted immediately. We worked with Elections Canada and the unions to set things right, instead of fighting like the former government did constantly to continue in its bad habits. And what I can say is that we consider that unions are important partners in developing our economy, and that is why we are reversing the former government's attacks on unions. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, yes, we do believe that we know that unions are partners for the Liberal Party, but not for all Canadians. There was an event that a few weeks ago, and two other events that were organized to help the Liberal Party, one in Vaughan and one in Oakville. That's at least 3 events. Can the Prime Minister tell us whether, yes or no, there was also illegal financing in at those events as well? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the Liberal Party has always obeyed the laws of Elections Canada and protected them in their enforcement, and we are proud of our record on that. In fact, the members of the Conservative Party continue to attack unions, and it is really appalling, Mr. Speaker. That is why we are going to eliminate bills, repeal bills C-377 and C-525 because they're unfair and undemocratic against unions in our country.
The Honourable Member for Hamilton Centre.
It really is Groundhog Day all over again, Mr. Speaker. Another Auditor General report, another scathing indictment of the previous government. Today, the Auditor General reports how that federal government made a complete mess of the CPP disability program. Long wait times, needlessly complicated 42-page application process, and no consistent standards for decisions. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives may have been the ones to make this mess, but it's up to Liberals to fix it. So what exactly is the new government going to do to fix it?
Yeah.
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I thank the member opposite for his question, Mr. Speaker. We are, of course, extremely concerned with what the Auditor General brought forward, and we're working very, very hard to repair some of the errors made in the past, because Canadians deserve a government that is open, transparent, and able to deliver in a responsible way the things that Canadians expect for it to deliver. I thank the member for his question.
The honourable member for Hamilton Centre.
Speaker, Canadians gave the previous government the boot for its many failures. Now we want to know how the current government is going to undo the damage. For example, the previous government has completely failed in the transition to Shared Services Canada, missing deadlines, failing to communicate with partners, data left unsecured, and millions misspent. Exactly what concrete steps is the minister going to take to ensure that shared services actually works and that information is actually protected?
Yes.
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Obviously, we have much to learn from the Auditor General's report, and indeed, how we deliver services, including shared services, which is IT around the government, in a responsible way is extremely important. What we've seen through our first months is it's not enough to do like the previous government and simply announce things. It's actually important to follow up on them, give the tools to get things done, and execute them responsibly. That's exactly what Canadians elected us to do.
The honourable member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. Mr. Speaker, further to the tabling of the Auditor General's report, we would expect that the government should indicate to us exactly what concrete measures will be taken. The processing times for Social Security Tribunal appeals have more than doubled. This is a long and complex process that takes almost 900 days. Such mismanagement has a direct impact on the lives of citizens who are living in vulnerable situations. Can the minister tell us what the plan is to put an end to these interminable wait times? The Honourable Minister of Social Affairs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the member for having recalled to us the importance of the issues that were raised by the Auditor General. I welcomed his report with a great deal of concern because it talks about a lot of the most vulnerable people in our society. I immediately met with the AG, and I can assure the House of Commons that we're going to do everything in our power to fix this situation. The honourable member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. The Auditor General also highlighted concerning and worrisome practices at the Canada Border Services Agency. Due to a lack of staff, high-risk shipments have been leaving the country without even being inspected. Canada must not become a superhighway for illegal goods. We have international commitments, and we must honour them. The Conservatives have gutted the Canada Border Services Agency, and we're seeing the consequences today. Will the government reinvest in CBSA so that it can fulfill its mandate properly? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Yes, indeed, Mr. Speaker, that's exactly what we intend to do. CBSA performs very important functions for all of Canadians, as well as our international customers, and we intend that this should be a first-class organization. We follow the advice of the Auditor General. There's an action plan being implemented now that will implement the vast majority of the recommendations before the end of this year.
Now the member for Red Deer Lacombe.
Mr. Speaker, in 1990, a minister had to resign for making a telephone call to a judge. In 1996, a minister had to resign because he wrote a letter to the Immigration and Refugee Board. In 2013, a minister resigned for writing a letter to the Federal Tax Court. All of these ministers resigned because of inappropriate contact with judges and tribunals. Is the Prime Minister going to set the same standard for his government?
Hear, hear. Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, colleagues will well know that when the government was sworn in, we released a very important document called Open and Accountable Government. It set a new standard in terms of transparency and accountability, not only for members of the Cabinet, for members of their staff, for the relationship between Canadians and Cabinet ministers and Canadians in the public service, and we're very proud to have raised the bar, Mr. Speaker, on that important endeavour.
The honourable member for Red Deer-Lacombe.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we'll see if double standard and Liberal government are still synonymous. And the reason I asked the previous question, Mr. Speaker, is the government House Leader wrote on behalf of the Prime Minister to a citizenship judge. He's been busy, Mr. Speaker. The government House Leader also wrote to 5 members of the Immigration and Refugee Board, the same board that former Liberal Minister David Collinette wrote to and had to resign over. How is the Prime Minister going to hold his House Leader responsible for this clear violation of ethical guidelines?
Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I was happy to write on behalf of the government to people whose appointments were made by that member's government to take effect after the election with no ability to be scrutinized by Parliament. Mr. Speaker, the member well knows there's a difference between writing to a government official about the nature of an appointment than writing to a government official about a specific case before him or her. The member should know that very well, and to confuse the two does no disservice to Canadians.
Yeah. The honourable member for Elgin, Middlesex, London.
Mr. Speaker, political interference is political interference.
Yes.
The Liberal House Leader has written a number of letters that directly interfere with the operations of the Immigration Review Board and citizenship judges. In the past, this exact issue has required ministers to resign. Mr. Speaker, just how low are the Liberal standards when it comes to ethical guidelines?
The honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, talking about ethical guidelines, when we're talking about a previous government's decision at 5 minutes to midnight to appoint a series of individuals to jobs to take effect after they lost the election with no ability for this House to scrutinize those appointments. Mr. Speaker, from our perspective, that was the abusive process. The member knows absolutely well that it's appropriate for ministers to talk to people about potential appointments. That is how the Governor and Council appointment process works, and she should know that very well.
The honourable member for Elgin, Middlesex, London.
Mr. Speaker, as I indicated, political interference is political interference. This is just not about the government and House Leader. His own letter says he was writing on behalf of the Prime Minister. When does the Prime Minister think it was the right to openly interfere with judges and quasi-judicial board members?
Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the logical extension of that argument would be to say that it's inappropriate for a government minister to talk to anybody about a potential appointment. So, for example, when the Attorney General is about to appoint somebody to the bench, she shouldn't possibly talk to that person. We should have what? Some anonymous message sent from some account? Mr. Speaker, that is completely ridiculous. The government has a responsibility to talk to people whose appointments we are questioning or whose appointments we're about to make. We did not talk to people about specific cases or their work with respect to any independent tribunal. The member knows that well, and she's confusing the issues.
The honourable member for Barrie, Springwater, Oro-Medonte.
Mr. Speaker, the government House Leader can't answer a question on ethics because he doesn't know what they are. Right. Mr. Speaker, this letter was sent on behalf of the Prime Minister of Canada. It's right there in black and white. It's not enough that the Liberal House Leader appears to be breaching ethical rules, but the Prime Minister himself is involved. Will the Prime Minister stand and tell this House how he's going to fix the obvious ethical breach?
Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, we're going to fix the obvious ethical breach of the previous government by taking a series of appointments that were made inappropriately and putting them before the standing committees of this House. That is exactly how we're proposing to clean up the ethical mess left to us by the previous government.
Honourable member for Barrie, Springwater, Oromo-Dante.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've seen this government fill its offices with former Dalton McGuinty staffers. McGuinty has cost Ontario taxpayers billions of dollars in higher taxes, big spending, and gas plant scandals. After hiring every McGuinty staffer they could find, will this government at least promise that Dalton McGuinty never gets a patronage appointment? Yes or no?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Thank you very much for the question. Mr. Speaker, we won't confirm about a personal appointment for anybody, but we are very happy to share with members of the House and the country our review of the appointments process, which we know will serve Canadians extremely well. Thank you.
Honourable member for Jonquière. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Auditor General's report is scathing. Half of all departments that were audited did not perform a gender-based analysis as required. Mr. Speaker, it's 2016. This is unacceptable. We must do better. Will the Liberal government pledge to give clear directives to ensure that all departments respect their commitments and finally put in place gender-based analysis?
The Honourable Minister for the Status of Women.
Speaker, I thank the honourable member for her question, and we welcome the Auditor General's report on gender-based analysis for the federal government. Our government believes strongly in being accountable for our obligations to ensure that meaningful GBA informs our policies, programs, and legislation. I'm especially proud of the leadership and tone set by our government from the very top that will ensure that this remains a focus for our government. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Churchill to Ratnook-Askey.
Mr. Speaker, let's move to the Social Security Tribunal, which is a complete mess, and it's the most vulnerable Canadians that are paying the price. Some are waiting 900 days for a decision to be made. The tribunal itself identified more than 60 areas of improvement, but it's going to require staff and resources. So is the new government willing to reverse the Conservative cuts, yes or no?
Honourable Minister of Social Development.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm surprised that question comes from the NDP instead of the party across the way, but I can respond by saying that we care about the proper functioning of the Social Security Tribunal because it deals with the cases of Canadians that are the most vulnerable and underprivileged in our society, and it functions well, fairly and effectively.
And the member for Milton.
Mr. Speaker, does the Minister of Finance have confidence in his department's officials, or will he dispute their findings that the Conservative government left them in surplus?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The only people who believe the Conservatives didn't leave us with the deficits are the Conservatives themselves, Mr. Speaker. The fiscal monitor is a snapshot in time. It's looking at your bank statement before you've paid the bills. It doesn't tell the whole story. The economic and fiscal update clearly shows that the previous government put us on track to a $3 billion deficit for this year. That train has left the station, Mr. Speaker. After 10 years of weak economic growth, this government has a plan to grow the economy and create jobs by focusing on the middle class, investing in infrastructure, and helping the...
Now remember for Milton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Actually, we're not the only ones. Canadians do. And more importantly, so does the Parliamentary Budget Officer know that the Conservative government left them in surplus. As to do with bank balances, maybe they should check their snapshot when they came in November, because I'm pretty sure it was in the black, not in the red, where they're going to drag it into after the end of this fiscal year. But the question's still the same, Mr. Speaker. Does the Minister of Finance believe his caucus, who are the only ones saying we're in deficit, or does he believe the Deputy Minister of Finance?
The Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, as I just said to the honourable colleagues, the previous government has put us on track for a $3 billion deficit for this year. Mr. President, we have a plan to grow the economy, to invest in Canadians, to create investment, to grow our economy, invest in infrastructure. That's what we said, Mr. Speaker. That's exactly what we're going to be doing.
The Honourable Member for Beauce.
know that prosperity does not come from government spending, but rather from entrepreneurs investing. Mr. Speaker, the finance minister is wrong, completely wrong, when he thinks that we can spend our way to prosperity on borrowed money. Will he work with us? Will he work with job-creating entrepreneurs by lowering taxes and balancing the budget?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Monsieur le Président, nous allons continuer.
Mr. Speaker, we will continue to invest to grow the economy, and as we said, Mr. Speaker, from the beginning, we're going to follow three cardinal principles in our approach. We're going to reduce the GDP debt ratio, we're going to continue investing in infrastructure, and we're going to balance the budget by the end of our mandate. That's what we told Canadians, Mr. Speaker, and that's exactly what we're going to do. The Honourable Member for Beauce. It's very sad to hear my colleague, because running deficits is not a long-term solution to stimulate the economy. When Canadians manage their own budgets, they know that when times are hard, it's not time to spend more. On the contrary, they say that when times are hard, they have to be careful of their spending and manage their budgets responsibly while saving money. Mr. Speaker, you don't become richer by spending money that you don't have. And I'd ask the Minister of Finance and the government to emerge from their fantasy world where spending equals prosperity and to provide a balanced budget for all Canadians. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, it's always impressive to hear my colleague on the other side of the House. Canadians know that when interest rates are low, it's time to invest, Mr. Speaker. That's what we said. We began with our program to reduce taxes for the middle class, and we're going to introduce our Canada Child Benefit in the next budget. We've made historic investments in infrastructure. Canadians know that when interest rates are low, it's time to invest to grow the economy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The member for Esquimalt, Saanich-Sooke.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Foreign Affairs is in Rome today to discuss the coalition's campaign against ISIS. In the 2015 campaign, the Liberals promised to end the bombing, yet it's 2016 and the bombing is still continuing. And today, the Liberal government is discussing its plans with our allies in Rome, while at the same time refusing to tell Canadians anything. Media are now reporting that the government is planning a new and expanded mission on the ground in Iraq. Can the Minister of Defence confirm that he's considering expanding the number of Canadian troops on the ground in Iraq, yes or no?
The Honourable Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, our government is committed to ending the airstrikes, but we do work in a coalition, and we have to do it in a responsible manner. There's a lot of things to factor in, and when we do end it, it will be done in a responsible manner. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Loki St. Mackey. Mr. Speaker, the bombing mission against the armed group Islamic State that was started by the Conservatives will end in a few weeks, but this government has not yet announced a new plan, though it promised one during the campaign. There are all sorts of rumors going around, including an expanded mission in Iraq. Canadians have a right to know, where is the minister's plan? What is he going to do? Will he be increasing the number of Canadian troops on the ground?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for the question. Thank you for pointing out that today the Minister of Foreign Affairs is meeting with a small group of the Global Coalition within ISO. Discussions are ongoing, of course, within government and with our coalition partners to refocus and optimize our contributions. As the U.S. Secretary of State said last week when we met with our North American partners, he has great confidence in the contribution Canada has made and is going to continue to make. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Ottawa West Nepean.
Mr. Speaker, during the election campaign, residents of my riding often objected to the process used by the previous government to impose the location of the memorial to the victims of communism. Can the Minister of Canadian Heritage provide this House with an update on the status of that memorial and public consultations?
Minister of Canadian Heritage.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Our government promised greater involvement of citizens in decision-making. And I'm proud to announce today that my department has launched an online public consultation on the memorial to the victims of communism. I call on Canadians from coast to coast to coast to share their vision on how we can honor the millions of people who fled communist regimes to find refuge in Canada. Based on these consultations, I will announce next steps. Thank you.
The honourable member for Selkirk Interlake Eastman.
Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we are very concerned with the comments made by the Defence Minister yesterday when he said we must not repeat the mistakes of the past. Over 40,000 Canadians served in Afghanistan. 159 gave their lives. Was it a mistake that the hard work of our armed forces enabled millions of children to go to school, including over 3 million girls? Was it a mistake that we restored the rights of women so they could work and have health care? Does the minister believe these successes, as we fought the Taliban, were all just a mistake?
The Honourable Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, as the honourable member across the floor knows very well, that I actually served from the start of the combat mission right to the end. And that was not only I was there to witness the issues that happened, I was there for the success. And this is the conversation that we actually had on the ground. And this is where, when we talked about how our political leadership failed us. And this is why I will take the time to making sure, as we create future plans, to make sure that those lessons are not lost. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
After the member from Selkirk Interlake Eastman asks his question and finishes, he might remind the gentleman in front of him from Bellechasse, Legitimate, Lévis, and Durham, this is not the Muppets. And the member for Selkirk Interlake Eastman.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Defence Minister said our past military activity was a mistake. Earlier today, when he was asked what his anti-ISIS plan was, he said, I don't know, ask the Foreign Minister, he's in Rome. Mr. Speaker, Canadians really want to know who's actually in charge of the Canadian Armed Forces. Is it the Minister of Defence or is it the Minister of Global Affairs?
The Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, I think we need to remind the member across the floor that the election is over, that we don't have to take things out of context. And when we look at creating our plan, we also look at learning from the lessons of the past. And as we move forward, we're going to be taking a comprehensive plan with the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Development. And when we come up with a plan, it will be a plan that Canadians can be proud of.
The honourable member for Thornhill.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And that's another example that when faced with tough policy decisions at home or abroad, this government favours procrastination over principled decision-making. Exactly. When Liberals play honest broker, Mr. Speaker, they prefer bafflegab to straight talk. Now, during the election campaign, Liberal MPs made strong commitments to match our Conservative government's support and defence of Ukraine. So why, after more than 3 months in office, can't the government actually denounce the Russian invasion and call it an illegal occupation?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Speaker. Of course, we have denounced that over and over, and we are steadfastly standing with the Ukraine, as you well know. But Canada is basing its foreign policy on a policy of an engagement, and that is much more difficult than a policy of isolationism and choosing to believe one's own point of view. It's a hard path for us, and we're choosing it not to find agreement all the time, but in order to be able to hold other countries to account, because we're talking.
The honourable member for Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, more than 10,000 Ukrainians are dead. More than 1.5 million civilians are displaced. During the election, the now Minister of Trade called for tough new measures against the Putin regime. The MP for Etobicoke Centre called for lethal weapon aid for Ukraine. But since the election, we've heard only sunny platitudes from the Prime Minister and the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Why have there been no specifics regarding enhanced military and defence cooperation with Ukraine?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, to reiterate, We are steadfast allies of the Ukraine. When we were provoked, and that was underscored by the opposition, by the foreign minister of Russia, we said just because he wants warmer relations doesn't mean we do until they demonstrate respect for territorial integrity and sovereignty of the Ukraine.
The Honourable Member for Berthier-Maskinongé. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, the Agriculture Minister said that he recognized the importance of protecting supply management and having a compensation plan for dairy producers. Now, the minister feels, or rather the trade minister seems to be saying that she doesn't recognize the compensation promised by the Conservatives. There is uncertainty in Quebec. Will the government go ahead and sign the TPP tomorrow? Will they confirm to the producers who came to Ottawa that there will be a more generous compensation package?
Agriculture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government is engaged with industry stakeholders on the outcome of the TPP. We understand the importance of compensation to the supply management sector. I've met with many stakeholders in the supply management sector, and I met with the Canadian dairy farmers today, and they understand we're working together to make things right. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Essex.
Mr. Speaker, dairy producers aren't the only ones to lose under this job-killing deal. The TPP would also expand loopholes to bring in temporary foreign workers with no regard for the impact on Canadian jobs and wages. The Conservatives allowed rampant abuse of the temporary foreign worker program on their watch, and now the Liberals are about to make matters even worse. Will the minister cancel her trip to New Zealand and take the time to look at the cost to Canadians instead of rushing to sign this reckless deal?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to Minister of Trade.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable member for her question. We are looking at all of these matters precisely because we promised Canadians that we would consult on the TPP. We are signing the agreement precisely to give us time in order to put the TPP before this Parliament, in order to study it in committee. Mr. Speaker, that's what we promised we would do, and that's what we're doing.
The Honourable Member for Banff Airdrie.
Mr. Speaker, the minister keeps pointing Canadians to her website on the Senate appointment process. But all that's found there is how this process will take place behind closed doors and leave Canadians in the dark. Let's go over what the website says. That the advisory board meets in secret, then provides a non-binding list in secret, and then the Prime Minister might choose a senator from the list, and of course that all happens completely in secret. So why do the Liberals want to leave Canadians completely in the dark on this?
The Honourable Minister of Democratic Institutions.
We are confident that the process we've introduced will lead to a stronger Senate. I do appreciate the honourable member's interest in the process here, and I have to ask, where was this commitment to good process when his government appointed nearly 60 senators? Was there a process? No. Whatever the process, it was flawed, and I urge him to join us as we implement a more open and transparent process for appointing senators.
We know it's question period, but the questions come from this side. Usually the member for Lanark, Frontenac, Kingston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, did the Minister of Democratic Institutions receive written advice from Justice Department Legal Counsel as to the constitutional validity of the Phase 1 Senate nomination process, which is now underway? And in particular, did she receive advice regarding the Supreme Court's conclusion that there is a constitutional requirement that any such process ensure that senators remain independent? In the event that she was given such counsel, will she table it in the House? Thank you.
The Minister of Democratic Institutions.
Mr. Speaker, we've committed to a thorough and thoughtful process for appointing senators. We have done so collaborating with different departments, and we are confident that the process we've implemented will enhance the performance of Senate without compromising the Constitution.
The member for Lanark, Frontenac, Kingston.
I hope that in her supplemental she'll actually answer the question I posed a moment ago. Here's the problem, Mr. Speaker. In its Senate reference ruling, the Supreme Court says that any appointment process that limits the independence of senators is unconstitutional. The fact that it is impossible for an individual to submit an application without working closely with a nominating organization, coupled with the 14-day deadline for Phase 1 applications that ends right after Valentine's Day, gives nominating organizations enormous control over those whom they sponsor. Therefore, isn't the Phase 1 nomination process an unconstitutional violation of the principle that senators must be independent?
Now, the Minister of Democratic Institutions.
Mr. Speaker, I recommend a second look at the website. The deadline for applications is February 15th at noon. The process we've introduced is more open and more transparent than anything the former government implemented, and we are confident that it will lead to a stronger Senate with establishing the confidence of Canadians in this important democratic institution.
The honourable member for Scarborough Centre.
Mr. Speaker, as in many areas across Canada, youth unemployment is a significant concern in my riding. As you know, Mr. Speaker, the youth unemployment rate in Canada is much higher than for the rest of the population. And already, youth studying at college and university are looking for summer jobs to help them save for their next year's tuition. Mr. Speaker, can the Minister advise the House what steps she is taking to help Canadian youth enter the labour market and specifically to find summer jobs to help pay for their education?
The Honourable Minister of Employment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my friend and member from Scarborough Centre for the question. Canada's Summer Jobs Program is accepting applications now, and application deadline is at the end of February 26th. For those individuals that are getting the opportunity, employment could begin as early as May. This is particularly of importance to young people who are looking for experience in the job market and finding those job opportunities we all want them to succeed at.
Hear, hear. The honourable member for Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou.
Mr. Speaker, last Friday the Parliamentary Secretary indicated that she had no problems getting the Financial Transparency Act. Does she not realize that transparency and accountability means readily accessible information? It does not mean having a report sitting in the basement of Indigenous Affairs. How can the minister justify to band members that they must plead or go to court to get basic financial information?
The Honourable Minister of Indigenous and Northern Affairs.
Speaker, everyone, including the First Nations, wants transparency and accountability, but we will achieve this by working with First Nations on a nation-to-nation basis. Top-down solutions have never worked. Band members now, in most places, coast to coast to coast, are able to find out this information. We will work with First Nations and achieve the goal of transparency and accountability with them.
The honourable member for Saskatoon West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Asbestos has been called the greatest industrial killer the world has ever known. And my colleagues have been fighting hard to get this carcinogenic and toxic material out of buildings and people's lives. This known carcinogen has claimed the lives of thousands of Canadian workers. So we were shocked, people were shocked to learn that while the federal government is spending millions to remove it from some buildings, they are installing new asbestos in other buildings. Will the Liberals now employ some common sense, stand up for worker safety, and immediately put a stop to this?
Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable colleague for her question. The government takes the health and safety of all of its workers seriously, in fact, any visitors to our buildings seriously, which is why whenever the presence of asbestos is identified, we move immediately to remediate the situation. And we certainly will undertake a review to make sure that asbestos is not a product that's used on an ongoing basis.
Here, here. The
honourable member for Brome-Missisquoi. First of all, Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank the constituents of Brome-Missisquoi for electing me to represent them here in the House. A number of rural areas, including mine, which is about an hour from Montreal, still don't have access to high-speed internet. So it is difficult for us to compete with major centers, attract young entrepreneurs, or help at-home workers. So my question is, what does the government intend to do to speed up access in rural areas? This is urgent.
The Minister of Innovation.
First of all, I'd like to take this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to thank the member for his work on this very important file. Mr. Speaker, the Government of Canada, through Connecting Canadians program, is working to extend and enhance broadband service to additional 280,000 Canadian households. Computers, mobile devices, and other modern technologies touch every part of our lives, Mr. Speaker, and it's for this reason that the government is working with both public and private partners to help deliver reliable, high-speed internet access at affordable prices, Mr. Speaker. This is good for the consumer, and it's good for business.
The honourable member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Canadians were deeply saddened by the recent brutal attacks on their fellow citizens by terrorists in Burkina Faso and Indonesia. The killing of 6 Canadians on humanitarian mission in Burkina Faso and the killing of a Canadian in Indonesia has shocked us all. I myself, on a visit to Nigeria a couple of years ago, came very close to becoming a victim of a terrorist attack. Our NGO communities, volunteers are working all over the world, often in dangerous places. The government owes it to the Canadians, Mr. Speaker, to take decisive action on fighting terrorism. When will they act, Mr.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for reminding us about what the tragedies that have happened recently and the respect that Canadians have paid to those families whose lives tragically end in Burkina Faso is important to continue to remember. When we will be acting will be very soon. I'm starting to talk like Minister Dion. He is in Rome now. I should aim so high. He will be arriving back from Rome, and he, together with the Minister of Defense, will be pleased to represent our positions.
Experienced members know, and new members are learning, that we don't use ministers' proper names. We refer to them by their title, by their department.
The Honourable Member for Manicouagan. Mr. Speaker, for over 20 years, reforms by both Liberal and Conservative governments have not only reduced the benefits available to unemployed workers, but have also resulted in only 2 out of 5 workers being eligible. This government needs to commit to making EI true insurance for our workers rather than just a tax on work. Will the government take into account the specific nature and needs of workers in the regions, especially seasonal workers, and also include regional leaders in the reform process?
Ministre d'Emploi.
Honourable Minister of Employment.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member for the question. Everyone in the House understands, all Canadians understand that our employment insurance program needs modernization. We have committed to lowering premiums, cutting benefit wait times, and providing more flexibility to all Canadians when they need it.
The Honourable Member for Bécancour-Nicolet-Sorel. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The infrastructure program that was launched in 2014 is not working in Quebec. Ottawa is involved in selecting projects and wants to improve them one by one, even though they come under Quebec and the municipalities. So there is no progress and negotiations are endless. Repeating this fiasco and just adding more money is not the answer. Does the government intend to keep the Prime Minister's election promise using the model of the gas tax transfer, that is, unconditional block transfers?
We have a Minister of Infrastructure and Communities.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We understand that the old Building Canada Fund that was established by the previous government needs some improvements in the process that we can get the money out to the provinces as quickly as possible. We have met with our representatives from the province of Quebec. We are trying to fix that problem because we understand investing in infrastructure is critical and we need to do it in a speedy way.
Enfin, la période de questions, je pense.
That ends question period for today. I think that the honourable member for the Jazz-Étumain has a point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know that the most important decisions that we have to take as parliamentarians, and that's the case for me at least, is that of sending our men and women to missions overseas. This issue was raised during question period today. And if I said something untoward, I apologize to the House. Having said that, I intend to treat all members of the House with respect, and I think that everyone should be treated with respect all around, and from you as part as well. I greatly appreciate the apologies of the member, because I know that we all want to be able to restrain ourselves in this House, even if there are subjects and issues for which we have a lot of passion or raise. So I appreciate his comments, and anticipate that this will not occur again in the future. Thank you. Government orders. Resume.